Let's go back to the First Minister's unveiling of a second document in the Building a New Scotland series today, making the case for Scottish independence. She made the announcement at Bute House earlier, warning that the next Prime Minister would shift further to the right, and says pledges of more devolution will not solve the democratic deficit. With us to break down what this means is Michael Keating, Emeritus Professor of Politics at the University of Aberdeen. Afternoon to you.
Good afternoon.
So, Michael, let me ask you first of all about this idea of the mandate for a referendum, because that's really what all of this hinges on, isn't it? And Nicola Sturgeon firmly believes that she has that. Has there ever been a comparable situation elsewhere?
Well, we don't know what the mandate means. You've got to remember the British Constitution is based upon conventions, and conventions are just understandings, and the whole notion of a mandate is precisely that, and disputable. I can't think of a situation elsewhere, because in other places they normally have constitutions. I can think of one case, however, when the government decided that they couldn't get a referendum so that a parliamentary majority would do. This was in Catalonia, where they've been having the same ding-dong about whether they can have a referendum on independence as we had in Scotland in recent years. And they went for what they could call plebiscitary elections. That is, they say, our effort to get a referendum in 2014 failed because it wasn't recognised, so we'll call the elections a plebiscite. And it didn't go anywhere because they didn't win a majority. That's the nearest I can think to the Scottish Government's latest argument about what would count as a mandate.
So if it's not, as you say, specifically defined, then, I mean, this is an argument that could just go on forever, really. If the Nicola Sturgeon, the SNP, say they have a mandate, the UK government says they don't. How do you ever resolve that?
It could go on a very long time. I said there's no definition of what a mandate is, but there are conventions and there's practice. And the practice hitherto has been that if a government or a party goes into an election requesting a mandate to have a referendum, then the referendum happens. We had two European referendums in 1975 and in 2016 on that basis, the Scottish devolution referendum of 1997. Similarly, that's really all we've got to go on, but then nothing is written down and it's got nothing to do with law. It could go on for a very long time because the UK government's argument is no, you do not have a right to have a referendum on independence because that matter is reserved. This will only be resolved politically, but it's very difficult to see what the political way out of that would be just now.
So if Nicola Sturgeon decides to go into the next election, essentially campaigning for independence, if that's what the SNP fight the election on, then would that be constitutional, and would that deliver a constitutional mandate?
Well, no, because there's no such thing as a constitutional mandate. It would merely reiterate what's already happened, namely that the SNP have won a series of elections saying they want independence and they want a referendum. But at that point, the onus will be on the unionist side.
So how would that differ
from
for the call for a Brexit referendum?
Well, the call for a Brexit referendum, again, David Cameron said if they won a majority, they would call a referendum. He didn't expect to get a majority, I think, but he did. And so he felt obliged to do that. But that's only a convention. There's no law that says that you have to do that. But the other parties nevertheless accepted the challenge. The people who are in favour of Remain accepted the challenge, and they said, "Okay, we'll participate in this referendum." And we know that the Brexit side won. But even the referendum itself, of course, was only advisory. Parliament was not constitutionally obliged to accept the result, but it did so because it thought that politically it would be obliged to accept the result.
But either way, this would still come down, would it, to, it looks very much now like a decision by the Supreme Court?
Not necessarily, because whichever way the Supreme Court plays it, it's not going to resolve it, because if the Supreme Court says no referendum, then there's no referendum. If they say a referendum would be permissible, it would only be on condition that the referendum doesn't have any effect. So that doesn't really resolve the constitutional problem. And in any case, even if an advisory referendum were allowed, the unionist side could simply say, we're not going to play the game. We're going to boycott it, and therefore it will be meaningless. So the only thing that really will guarantee a meaningful referendum would be an agreement by the two governments to do it, and that's just not going to happen.
So
in the
what
foreseeable
does
future.
Nicola Sturgeon setting out this paper today, and there's a whole series of papers that she is involved with now, does it bring us any further, provide any more clarity for a way forward?
It's trying to shift the argument away from independence towards the idea of democracy and the right of self-determination. This also happened in Catalonia. The pro-independence people were saying, well, not only can we not become independent, we're not even allowed to ask the question. That's a fundamental democratic right. And clearly that's what the SNP is trying to do. They're also reiterating the argument that Scotland gets governments it didn't vote for. The unionists will say, well, you do have a vote in UK elections. You just lost on the UK as a whole. That's the argument, but it doesn't move the constitutional position forward any further. It's all about political manoeuvring. And this indeed could go on for a very long time.
OK, well, it sounds as if it will. Thank you very much for joining us this lunchtime. Michael Keating there, Emeritus Professor of Politics at the University of Aberdeen.